We'd love to give you a quick trigger warning that in this episode, we touch on the topic of suicide ideation. And if this is something triggering for you, then please skip this episode and listen to something else, or at least be prepared and warned that at some point in this conversation, we are going to touch on this topic.
Hello and welcome to Into Your Life podcast. I'm Lenka and I'm joined here by my wonderful co-host Natalie.
Hi, we invite you to join our weekly conversations about finding more life in one's life.
Well, what does it actually mean?
We have discussions with guests about ways to live happier, healthier, and more fulfilling lives, both personally and professionally.
That sounds great. Let's go.
Hi there, and welcome to another episode. Today we have a very special guest, and I'm so excited and glad to have Shane Craddock today with us. Shane is an author and a podcaster, a consultant. He is an absolutely interesting person, flying over through the internet from Ireland, joining our virtual conversation here. He wrote the book, The Inner CEO. He has a very interesting podcast called The Inner Edge. And I'm so curious just to learn more from him, from his journey, from his experience about, why the inner CEO matters. How can we all tap into it a bit more, and how he even came up with this concept. But as always, I'd rather hand over to Shane and let him introduce himself properly to us. So hi, Shane, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Lenka. Thanks for the kind words. And I can see Natalie as well, so I'm going to say hi to Natalie here officially as well. I never probably give the same answer twice when somebody asks me, what do you do? Because sometimes I struggle to say what I do. But essentially, today what's coming to mind is that, look, as you said, I do lots of different things, but the core, my sense of purpose is that I'm helping people to thrive. That's really what gets me out of bed in the morning. And there's lots of angles to that, which I guess we'll explore here. And I guess I kind of figured out in my own journey that the key to that, most of my clients are leaders. They can be entrepreneurs, self-employed CEOs, things like that. What I realized in my own journey first was that actually to thrive, what I learned the hard way was it didn't really matter what I knew. What mattered was really the inner game. And in relation to that, then my mindset. So a lot of the work that I do is on helping people understand, how do you really leverage your mindset? Not just because you read a book doesn't mean anything anymore. There's too many books, too many videos, too many audios, too many podcasts actually, Lenka, as well. So, how do you create real change that actually comes into your behavior so that we see it? And then if it comes into your behavior, well, then we're going to get results. So I learned that the hard way myself many years ago, and I do my best every day to live what I see and what I know. And it's not easy, but my job is to go on a journey that I suppose myself and the client decide, and we go on a journey together. It could be short, could be long, and see, can we make the impossible happen? And that's what kind of gives me a buzz. I like it when people go for, do you know what, this seems impossible, but could you help me? And I go, well, let's have a look at it.
It really seems impossible because there's so many things that come in play. And as you said, there's so many books and podcasts and guidance on, our motivation, changing habits, changing patterns, aligning our goals and aligning ourselves and building a thriving life and thriving businesses and improving our health. And we can get very easily overwhelmed by the wealth of resources and all the things we should be doing and all the modalities and techniques we should be trying. And it's really hard then to know, where do I start? Where do I focus? And what really then matters for me to keep going to get to where I want to be. So when someone like that comes to you, be it a very successful entrepreneur or, and someone on their journey in their personal life, in their business life, wanting to get to this state of thriving, that they, have achieved fair amount of success, but maybe it's been a bit too much of a hustle. And we all, I guess, are looking for this ease and effortless flow and find this thriving feeling a bit more in our lives. Where do you even start with that?
Oh, yeah, I should listen. Let's give up now. No, well, look, I think ultimately, it's too easy in today's world to get overwhelmed. It's very common. But what is overwhelm? Overwhelm is really where you've lost your attention into the almost like a barrage of thinking. And it's just your thinking is very connected, obviously, to your feeling. And I suppose what I realized in my own journey, and then, look to share it with clients, was I realized, oh, I didn't really have any understanding, not really about how my mind worked. I didn't understand how to make change through understanding my mind. Like words like if you say health as a word, obviously there's like 1,000 different interpretations that people can take out of the word health. And we have now the same problem with mind and with mindset, because there's many different takes and understandings on what they mean. And ultimately, it doesn't even really matter what they mean, other than if you feel that I'm getting the results that matter to me most. And, and that, you can look at things like, let's forget about results in business for a second, but obviously that is important in terms of like having cash in bank. It's very important. But even just to be able to enjoy your life. I've spent a lot of time in what I do now. I've been working in this over 25 years, so I have a lot of experience. I didn't really start off with the intention of going into this career. My sister kind of jokes and said that I kind of found a way to make up a job, which is kind of true, because my family still don't really understand what I do. Because to be fair, based even on my description here about how people thrive, like, what does that actually mean? But like what it means is that, like, depending on, I use a combination of different processes. Like, for example, you could say coaching, you could say facilitation, you could sometimes say counseling, you could say kick-assing, smacking, uh, not taking any BS from anybody, or maybe being the one to say, hey, no, you're talking BS, give it to them straight. So whatever you want to call those, they're not necessarily always pure coaching or things like that. But I learned that the hard way myself, because, as you know, Lenka, my own personal story, unfortunately, I'm not 24, 25 anymore. But when I was 24, about a week before my 25th birthday, I woke up with the intention of kind of, well, exiting stage left off the planet, So I got myself into, I didn't realize at the time I was in a very dark place. I was suicidally depressed, and I had planned that day to kind of step off stage Earth with a very specific plan. And I had this weird checklist that I was working through over a couple of days of things that I wanted to do before I went. And I pretty much got to every checkpoint except for one, which was to hear my mother's voice on the phone, which was my way of saying goodbye. And when I rang home, I lived in Cork at the time. My parents live in Kilkenny, which is in the southeast of Ireland. Cork's in the south of Ireland. And my mom didn't answer the phone. My dad answered the phone, and he was unexpectedly having a late lunch. And it was a Friday, as I say, it was a week before, I think, my 25th birthday or 24th birthday, I forget now. But my dad would normally never, and still even to this day, doesn't really want to get into emotional conversations, or it's more like, it's very much, how's work? Did you see the latest match? And do you want to talk to your mother? And but this day he didn't do that, because he obviously picked up on something, and he said, what's wrong? And that question kind of saved me, because it stopped me in my tracks. I couldn't tell him what was wrong. I didn't know what was wrong. I just knew, obviously, I wasn't in a good space. And long story short, after some tears and not being able to say what was wrong, he just said, listen, can I call you back in 5 minutes? He said, would you promise me you won't move? And I said, okay. I was in a phone box, one of these old style phone boxes that you don't see anymore. And it was before mobile phones. And he rang me back and he said, I want you to ring this number. And I said, who's that? And he said, it's a number of a friend of mine called Morris. He's a counselor. He's a friend of mine. I trust him. You can tell him what's wrong if you don't want to tell me, or if you can't tell me. And I said, okay. So I rang Morris, and he answered the phone straight away. And he got out of me to say what I was going to do, which wasn't easy. And he said, okay. He said, that's not good. said, I want you to go back to work, make up some excuse about being sick, and I want you to get in the car and I want you to drive to me now. It was a Friday afternoon. It was around 1:30. And so that's what I did. And I drove to him. And that was the start of major change. It was the start of a huge pivot in my life. It was so big, I can't describe, because obviously I'm alive, which is number one. But then number two is when I was with Morris in that first meeting, there was a few things he said to me that I didn't like. The first thing was, look, it's probably going to get a little bit worse before it gets better. I was like, oh my God. I thought you were going to give me a pill to make it all go away. Now, in my case, in that situation, he wasn't really a fan of medication. I think medication has a role at certain times, actually, especially when it comes to depression. I'm not against it at all. But in that case, he wasn't. So I just kind of took his lead. I just said, can you make the pain go away? He said, yeah, but it's going to take a bit of time. And then he said, by the way, I'm not going to make the pain go away. You're going to make the pain go away. And I went, sorry, I don't know how to do that. And he said, no, I'm going to show you. And then he said, look, do you realize that you have a mind? And that stopped me in my tracks because I didn't know what that meant. I kind of knew I had a mind. I never really thought about it. Nobody ever told me anything about it in school or even at home. And that question kind of stopped me in my tracks because apart from kind of thinking, well, why does that matter? Because at the time, in my head, I was thinking, no, you're looking down the wrong avenue, dude. The problem isn't my mind. The problem is what's going on in my world. And the problem is kind of me. It's not nothing to do with my mind. It's my circumstances. I don't like what's going on. And I now know that to be a major flaw in the system in terms of how we understand the world. That how I feel has nothing to do with my circumstances and really nothing to do with anybody around me. It's all to do with how I'm managing myself inside. But that understanding didn't come until a long time after that, I can tell you. So Mars kind of really pointed me in the right direction, gave me some support, didn't give me all the answers by any means. Actually, most of the game-changing answers came well after I'd departed from Mars, but he was the one to support me. And if I'm being honest, I'm going to use a word that isn't always shared and things like this, but he kind of showed love to me. You know, he cared. He cared. And I realized myself even, and I've still said that to many people who've been in difficult circumstances and even, you know, because business in particular as well. I mean, I haven't looked at the research yet around this, but it is bopping around my head that I think if I look at, I'm curious about depression and stress in entrepreneurs. I think there's some interesting stats there would be my guess. Because my own experience of talking to CEOs and entrepreneurs, that when I share my story, inevitably 7 out of 10 will go, well, actually being honest, I had a difficult time here and I was da-da-da-da-da. Might have been suicidally depressed, but they would have been depressed. And they would have never told anybody that. So we're kind of, I think like I have enough experience at this point to kind of feel that I'm allowed to speak about it with a bit of authority. Not just my own point of view. I mean, I can only share my own experience as a human. So that's really enough for me. And then also my experience of working with a lot of people over 25 years. But from that point with Morris, and the point I wanted to make was that, you know, when he said you have a mind, I kind of heard, okay, I have a mind, but then I heard it a different way. I heard it almost like I'm holding up my phone here. I have a phone. So I was thinking, okay, well, hang on. The phone isn't me. I'm holding the phone. So I thought, okay, who's holding the mind? And that was very confusing, but that proved to be an important insight because it was the start of me even questioning, well, hang on a second here. My mind is the home to all these different beliefs. And it's definitely home to this internal voice that's telling me I'm a loser and that I should check off the planet. I mean, I'm thinking, oh, hang on. So that inner voice isn't me then. What's that about? Where's that coming from? And then I realized, oh, I don't have to believe what I'm thinking. And that, silly as it might seem, that was a huge game-changing moment for me because that was a massive, massive insight. I went, oh, because up to that point, if my inner voice, and I'm sure there's probably some people listening to this who possibly are there, that they're kind of going, what inner voice is he talking about? And I'm going to say, that inner voice, the one that you think is you. And I realized I'm very clear that's not me. It's just a part of my inner world. And I guess we'll come to the inner C in a second because to me, that world needs a leader. And that's what I call the inner CEO, is that that leader isn't that inner voice. That's a different part of your mind. The inner CEO is really the awareness that is aware of that inner voice. And, if you say to somebody, are you aware of what you're thinking? They might pause and they'll go eventually, yeah, I'm aware of what I'm thinking. I say, okay. So that means there's something separate to your thinking you're looking at. There's something there. So what's that? They're like, never thought about it. So, well, I think you should, because that's the conscious bit of your awareness. And that kind of language traditionally might have been maybe more in what you might call the spiritual realm. But increasingly, certainly in the last 10 years, even institutions like the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, often rated #1 university in the world, they are steeped in this. They are looking at this from a very scientific point of view. They recognize that there's something there. They recognize the value of it. And they are teaching leaders how to move into a more expanded sense of presence and awareness, all with the view of kind of detaching to a degree from the power of that inner voice. Because we all know, I mean, I have enough experience now to know it's universal that that inner voice sometimes is your friend, but then sometimes it turns against you. And sometimes that can be very severe, like in my case. For a lot of people, it will never be maybe that severe, or maybe it just lasts for a day. Like me, mine was going on for months. It was almost 2 years. And thankfully I was able to get out of it. But that insight of, oh, I don't necessarily have to believe it. And then that was the start of me learning something really important that took, if I'm being really honest with you guys, I would say it took me many years to really, really see this. Information doesn't change anything. I used to think it did. So if I read, at the start, it definitely helped me. I mean, I read all these different types of books. I learned to load them, and I was like, oh yeah, I can do this, I can do that. And I definitely applied myself because I was so desperate. I was hungry. I said, let's just make the pain go away. But what I realized in time was that, in a way, I knew so much information over, say, even years after working with Morris. I just became obsessed with self-development, professional development, the mind, mindset, everything in that area, the laws of achievement, blah, blah, blah. And I mean, I learned a huge amount. But when I looked at my results, they weren't matching up. There was a gap, a big gap. And then I went, ooh, something's missing. And I think I see a lot of people there now. Because, like, you mentioned I've written a book called The Inner CEO. It's always nice to see a book and get it out there and for people to be affected by it. It's great. But the reality is that no matter how good your book is, most people who read the book, they won't always get change that they think they're going to get. That's the truth. Like, you'll always get some who will, if they're very motivated and get really apply themselves to the book, then you'll see change. But I think it's probably going to be 20% or less. Most people read the book for intellectual stimulation and go, oh, now I know something new. But if you don't integrate it, buy it, it's worthless. And that's where I learned the difference between intellectually understanding something over time versus actually understanding something. And then so what I realized was that, okay, information doesn't really cause massive change necessarily. What causes change is insight. And what is insight? Insight is basically seeing something yourself. Seeing something yourself that you hadn't seen before. And you go, oh, and that causes change. So for example, when I said, I have a mind. Oh, what was that? Oh, that's different. And then I went, oh, hang on. I don't have to believe my thinking. Like, as silly as that sounds, that was a massive, massive insight. And I saw it and I went, oh, and once you see something, you can't take it back. It's always there. You've seen it. It's too late. It's like you see behind the curtain of the Wizard of Oz. And I over the years in a business context, I've sometimes struggled, at times to say to clients, well, what do I do? And I've had different people try to help me. And I remember a couple of years ago, somebody who was very clever with words and marketing said to me, oh yeah, no, I know what you do now. And I said, what do I do? They said, oh yeah, you help business people see the unseen. And that's kind of like, I can't say that to most people, but without context, they'll be like, what are you talking about? You're full of it. But it is kind of my job is that I go, oh, okay, do you see that you're doing this and you're kind of holding yourself back here? And there's a limiting belief here, actually. Can we explore this? Are you open to talking about it? Can you see that you allow yourself to get triggered here. You can see that you're reacting to this person when they walk in the room, but you're not reacting to this person when they walk in the room. Can you see that you're actually creating your own levels of stress? Let's talk about that. And they go, I don't see that. Yeah, no, let's talk about it. So that's where I'd say go into the inner world. And go back to Morris, and then I'm going to shut up because I've been rambling on there now for a few minutes. So guys can ask me a question, right? Hopefully it's still making sense. But what Morris did for me, the greatest gift Morris gave me was that by asking that question, do you have a mind? In a way, it was kind of to me like he was pointing to a corner of the room that I'd never looked at. And in the corner of the room was a door that was in the darkness. And on the door, they looked at it, it said inner. And I pushed that door open because of him. And I looked inside, thinking it would be small, and it was absolutely ginormous. And I went, oh, I was saying to you before we went onto live here that I enjoy hiking. So in a way, it's kind of like, oh, put on my backpack, put on my hiking boots, and let's go in here because we're going to be in here for a while because actually it's huge. And I've just been exploring that world myself personally for 25 years. I've been lucky enough that there's some people silly enough to pay me to to get my advice about what I've seen, and all I can share is what I know myself. You can't guarantee anything to anybody else, but it does seem to have helped a lot of people, and that's very satisfying from a day-to-day work point of view. I'm lucky in my job that not all the time, but regularly you kind of see, oh, that made a difference there to that person's life, and other people connected to them.
Well, there is so much to unpack. Like throughout the whole time, I was like, I have this question, and I have this question, and now I have this question, and now I have this question, and now I have this question. So obviously, it's
Well, I'm glad to see, first of all, that you have an inner voice. So we've established that you have one. So hopefully, Natalie, you have one too, and we're not the only people who are weirdos here.
No, you're not the only weirdos. I have one too, and yes, it's also like Lenka going, oh, I need to speak all that.
Good.
But I'll leave Lenka to go first.
Cool.
Yeah, I think for me, going back to the beginning, few things that really popped in my mind are, well, there were two things. One was the power of awareness, which then we almost broke down that it's actually not as much of a power, because awareness, you cannot change and move forward without becoming aware and changing the frame of reference, changing something. But then often we get so stuck on becoming aware. That's where all the knowledge, all the podcasts, all the books come in place. Like, oh, now I know. But knowing is not enough.
Yeah.
Another point that you really honed down for me was looking at it. It's going to take a while, that there is no quick fix, no quick win. And again, yes, medication is important and it's valuable. But overall, we're looking at, improving our lives, building our businesses, thriving, whatever the scale of the change that we're seeking is. It's not going to be a quick win. We ourselves will have to put in the work. Yes, we should work with other people. We need help. We shouldn't go it alone. But we can hire all the coaches we want. We can work with all the facilitators we want. And yet we need to acknowledge, be it on our health and well-being, be it on our businesses, that it's us who needs to do the work. Now we're going to the fact that, okay, well, now we're not only doing the work on the outward part of us, let's call it that way, on the skills and on the knowledge and on the craft and on the new courses and new training, but now we're looking at establishing this inner CEO abilities of unpacking this puzzle that you presented to us with. We have a mind. Whatever we say here inside isn't necessarily true. So we're kind of lying to ourselves in our own minds. We live in a world through a set filter. I always say through neuroscience, we know that whatever we see, whatever we experience, whatever we can taste and touch, it's not technically a reality. It's just our brains predicting what it's very likely to be that we're gonna see. It's interesting then to think how really this impacts our beliefs and how we then interact in ourselves, how we interact with the world, how we build ourselves in our careers and our lives. So when we are open to this idea now that we have a mind, it's not us, it's separate to us, we can work with it, we can have a conversation with it. We are still thinking about, okay, we might have some limiting beliefs. There is this thing called mindset that we might need to be changing. I still have the same question. Where do I start? I still have the question of, okay, and I know that I maybe need to get better understanding, better grip of my inner CEO, this beautiful concept. And I know that you have a couple of fundamentals that come into this place of building your own inner CEO. Could you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a few things you said there now that I think are important. I mean, look, when you say where do you start, I think certainly from my point of view, it depends on the person and it depends on where they're at. And my job is to kind of, first of all, meet them as to where they're at, and then we kind of go from there. But that especially with regards to what's their reality and how they look into things, so I can understand even how they see the world, how they think, how they use their mind. So that's kind of a starting point. But I think like if somebody's listening to this, for example, we said there's no quick fix. That's not 100% true, because sometimes somebody will see something in the moment. Here's what I realized. You can't. I kind of say to people, look, it's not a quick fix. That's to kind of manage expectations, because that's kind of what happens for the majority. It's just sometimes it just takes a little bit of time. For me, it took some time, but then sometimes people can have a really big aha moment quite quickly. So somebody listening to your podcast right now could literally have, oh, and you can't predict it. And you might hear the same words and go, well, I heard the same thing. Why are you reacting like that? It's because they were ready to see something. That they're on their journey and they're ready to see something. So that's an important thing. And that, like, I think the first starting point, really, even from what you've said, is not to overthink this, right? Because your mind will go, well, okay, what do I need to know? Well, I just said, like, you're not your mind, so we don't want to be listening to the mind. So the reality is, you're talking about awareness, and you're right. You're very right. You can kind of get very intellectual about that, and there's all sorts of books and information about that, and it's hard. But I think for me, the number one skill, or the key skill in both the outer and the inner game, is relaxed concentration. And if I'm able to have a relaxed mind, whatever way I get there, as far as I'm concerned, that's 60% of the equation. So, for some people, it could be different things, but like, I think we have an innate ability. I was with a group this morning, and I was saying to them, if you think about like a 6-year-old child, 5-year-old child playing, I said, do we have to train them about anything to do with creativity or confidence? No, you don't. They're just fully engaged, and they're aware. They are aware beings. It's only as they get a bit older, and maybe we infect them with society, that their conscious minds come in and get in the way. They get self-conscious. Sometimes that's part of growing up as well. But then that innate stuff, I think, gets blocked out. So what I'd be saying to people listening to this is, like, what if we got it wrong? Well, what if the assumption we've been making about, so instead of actually you there with your mind thinking, okay, what am I missing? What do I need to know? What's the information? Give me the information. Give me the 5 steps, Shane. Give me the 5 steps. Where do I start? What if that's the wrong assumption or question? What if instead it's like, well, hold on. What if the assumption was, and this is going to sound silly to some people, is actually, if you relaxed your mind, you'd be okay. If you stopped feeding the worry, if you stopped, it's not that there's not work to be done or skills to be learned about selling in business or getting on it and actually getting stuck in. What I find more and more is that people are caught up with thinking that is blocking them doing their job. So, I was talking to somebody just over a week ago who, has a lot of experience. Like, they're older than me. They're really, really good at what they do in terms of they know. But they were just saying, like, I don't know my purpose. I don't know my why. And I was like, who cares? Like, why is it that important? We said, well, everybody has a why. If I don't have a why, it means I'm not doing something right. And I say, no, your mind has just made that up as a condition for you to be getting on with work. I said, if there was 5 things for you to get stuck into, I bet you're not doing any of them at the moment. He said, I'm not. I said, yeah. So forget about your purpose. Let's focus on cash and just getting a few sales. Because when you get into the moment, relaxed concentration, let's list all the cliches around that, in the moment, in the now, presence, mindfulness, whatever you want to call it. It's just the ability to be here with a clear mind. That is the starting point. And that's the end point too. And everything else in between is really about reducing the interference that comes from your mind. So I think that's a key point. Now, I will say that, even this morning with the group I was talking a bit about with the group of leaders up in Dublin about some of this. I have found that it does help people to manage their mood. So, even the guys up in Dublin, all busy, all good people, all very smart, all very committed, doing their best, but not managing their mood and not managing. When I say mood, I suppose I use an Irish word called neart, which is Neart. It's a Gaelic word, neart, which means vitality. And I very much encourage them, I say, listen, I talked about relaxed concentration and presence today. We talked about, like, how can you do that? And the simplest one of all is, hey, just take 5 slow, deep breaths now. Slow your mind down. Easy, free. No major course needed for that. That's easy. So everybody can do that. So that's a starting point. And then after that, other people got their own way of doing it. But then your mood is dependent on probably 4 main areas, physical fitness, mental fitness, emotional fitness, and then spirit or energy fitness. And they all combine to kind of keep you in a good state. And it is my experience that when my state is good, when I was depressed, I wasn't managing myself in those 4 areas at all. I understand it much better now. There's layers to it, but all that matters is what works for you. So somebody listening to this, you could say, like, let's just say they got themselves into a tizzy in their mind, they're overwhelmed, or they're just overanalyzing. Just to recognize that you are overanalyzing, overthinking is 50% of the equation. And you go, okay, do you know what? I'm going to step outside here. I'm just going to go for a walk, take 5 breaths. That's a great start. And then I might say, hey, I know this sounds so simple, but what would be one thing you could do more consistently over the next 2 weeks that would make a difference to you every day in terms of your energy and your mood? And people will find something that works for them. Like, what works for you doesn't necessarily have to work for me, etc. And it's what works for you. And they'll say, well, this thing. I'll say, okay, we'll do that every day, and let's see what happens. And it's always good. It's simple stuff. Now, once somebody gets a feel for it, they're kind of go, actually, this kind of makes more sense to me. Yeah, then you can start to look at using thought more creatively, more constructively, more strategically. I mean, thought is incredible in terms of what it allows us to do. But most people, before they get to that use of thought, in terms of, because you can use thought to build a business, to sell, to communicate. You can use it to do so much. But if you don't have a feel for the foundation of the basis of what we're talking about, it'll tie you up in knots. That's what overwhelm is. It's thought tying itself up in knots. So does that make any sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And it's great to know that, again, the starting point doesn't have to be this big, complicated, thing that we need to find our way to, that the start could be as simple as taking a couple breaths, going outside to nature, taking this moment to get to this. And I like how you describe this kind of relaxed mind. And I always believed, and that was for me, one of the biggest realizations on this journey of health and well-being and kind of mental, emotional health, was that we can't think ourselves out of overwhelm and anxiety and depression, that it needs to come down to the body, that it needs to evolve more of the physical. So be it the breath, be it outside in nature, paying attention to the senses and really bringing ourselves to the present moment. And again, taking the lesson from children and kids who are we are as human beings so intuitively born with this ability to be present and fully focused and fully immersed. And obviously, as our prefrontal cortex, how the thinking executive functions keep growing and evolving, we are kind of taken a lot more away from the present moment, that we start to live in the past and in the future and in the possible realities, rather than focusing on the one reality that we have. And then again, the one reality could be shaped by lots of the filters and limiting beliefs and the inner chatter that we have, that we then start believing, well, this is the truth and the only truth, and this is the reality, and this is how it is, rather than acknowledging and understanding that no, this is just what we believe in, this is what we've always been told, this is, you know, how we ended up being wired. And I'm interested to know then, when people are on this journey, I always find it that there needs to be a bit of a pattern interruption, because if we want to break a habit, if we want to accomplish change, if we want to change a mindset, again, we're using all these words that are in this world are very loosely defined, but yet we need to interrupt what we've always been doing. We need to find a way of then making it a habit and finding this new pathway and staying on the pathway.
Yeah.
And to me, the realization again that knowing is not half the battle, because we all know what to do to be healthy, like the basics of healthy diet, exercise, longevity, we all know that. But it's so hard for us to do it, and even if we really want to do it, we still need to put in the effort to keep going.
Yeah. And I mean, a key part of kind of making that kind of positive change is also understanding what we said already about the inner voice. The fact that it's there, the fact that it's commenting all the time. As people are listening to this podcast, I mean, you guys already said, it was saying, well, ask this question, ask that question, what about this, what about that? It's talking all the time, it's narrating all the time. I guarantee you, though, somebody listening to this podcast has never thought about the fact that that inner voice, that they don't have to listen to it. Guarantee you. Hopefully they'll send you an email to say, hey, I'm that person. And if it does, or when it happens, let me know, because I always like to hear, yes, we got another one back in the game. I remember, I mean, that's a second practical point. Like, and you know, you said something about the fundamentals. I'll come back to that in a second, Lenka, because that is important. But I remember doing a talk in Dublin, I don't know, 8-9 years ago, and about some of this stuff in the relation to innovation and leadership. And I asked, there was about 100 people in the room, and I just said, hey, hands up, who here has an inner voice? Thankfully for me, everybody put their hand up, because I'm always afraid that, oh my, maybe it's not, maybe there's only a few of us. Everybody put up their hand, and I said, okay, take your hand down if you know that that inner voice isn't you. And half the room took their hand down. So there's 50 people sitting with their hand up, and they're all kind of looking around very confused. And I said, okay, look, I'm just going to say it. That inner voice isn't you. And there was just this pause. And over to my left, there was a woman. I couldn't see her because she was blocked by somebody in front of her, but all I heard was this. And I didn't hear anything else. I was talking to different people that night, didn't meet her. But the next day she sent me an email and said, hey, I was doing a let out of gas, because when she let out the gas, everybody started laughing. It was a good icebreaker. But she said, oh my God, she said, I just had this major aha moment. I realized I have been living through what that inner voice tells me. So I've been living in fear. I've been believing it about all the different opinions that she had collected over her lifetime. So that inner voice is coming from your personal mind. And in the book, I talk about, like, all of us as humans have a mind, and we all think, and we're all aware. And but I identify 5 capacities of the mind that are very powerful once you consciously know how to use them, but they're also very dangerous if you don't, which is what happens. And so one of them is what I call the iceberg, you know, and some of these phrases aren't unique to me, but I've just put them all together in one area in the book called the 5 fundamentals. There are 5 fundamental ways that your mind can be used for good or for bad. And the iceberg is really, what it means is that, you know, you collect information over your lifetime, and you store it in your unconscious mind. And what's in your unconscious mind, if you're not aware that the inner voice isn't you, that unconscious mind will rule your life. When you understand clearly that you don't have to listen to your inner voice, which is kind of the mouthpiece for your unconscious mind, you can just ignore what it says. So if it says, you can't succeed here. Like, I used to fight with my mind and think, why am I thinking negative? Now if it says something, I just go, yeah, that's cool. Proceed, ignore. it doesn't cause me any stress. And then the other elements within that as well would be your mind is like a projector. So, what you bring to mind in your mind is like a movie projector. So first of all, the film is your thinking, the light is your attention and your awareness. And if you pay attention to thinking, it magnifies, it amplifies. That's the first element of the projector. And the second element is that you feel what you see on screen. So if you're in a movie watching a horror, you feel afraid. What we don't realize is that we're playing horror movies to ourselves sometimes in our minds. And we're also playing really good movies. And the more you take control of that, it's very powerful. So like on a very practical level, where can you start as well? I did it with these leaders today. I'd say, listen, I give them the four daily actions. And one of them at the start of the day just says, listen, start of a day, pick your top 3 outcomes for the day, take 2 minutes and just turn on the projector in your mind and just imagine yourself succeeding getting those done. And you're telling your mind, this is what we're going to do. But because it's good, it also changes your mood. It's good for your mood, much better than taking in the news or stuff on Facebook, or it's putting constructive, good food into your mind. This is what we're going to do, which leads to the third fundamental, which is your mind's like a missile. It moves towards what it's focused on. So if the more I'm telling my mind, this is where I want to go, bizarrely, that's kind of where you end up. But if that could be negative or positive. Does that all make sense? So then the fourth one, I may as well keep going because I'm on a roll and then you can shut me up. The fourth one is your mind is like a snow globe, which means it works best when it's calm, clear, and settled. And most people's minds is the opposite. And what is really the biggest activator of your snow globe, 2 things really. One is a lack of awareness of the fact that you're shaking the globe with your thinking. But the other bit is the phone. And it's so addictive, it's so accessible. And every time you go in there, you start to activate the snow globe, especially when people wake up in the morning, usually the first thing they do. And then the last of the 5 fundamentals is your mind's like a garden. And insofar as that, if you don't look after a garden in real life, it just grows weeds. There might be nice plants in there, but they will get overrun by weeds. That's just nature. And it seems to me that your mind is the same. That if you have to be like conscious gardener, you're going to go in and you're going to water the flowers. You're going to design nice things in your mind. You're going to plant good seeds in your health, your business, finances, relationship. And as you start to do that, whatever grows inside in your mind will come into your life. It's no doubt about it. If there's weeds in your mind, they come into your life. And so it's to consciously do it all the time. It's a never-ending game, just like a garden is a never-ending game. If I drop the ball in the garden, it just gets overrun with weeds. It just happens. And you might have really good stuff in your mind, even if you had a great childhood. So maybe you're lucky you get away with it if you're just relax and just let it go. But it seems to me that you can have a lot of fun kind of planting cool stuff in your mind and then watching it come to life. And that can be a lot of fun if you want to go with it. So that's a short snapshot of a good chunk of the book.
Thank you. And it's so, as you're talking, I've been listening to your audio book and it's like, oh yes, it's reminding me. And one thing that I've really noticed is, especially for me personally, is when I listen, I need to listen over and over again to get it in. And one thing that really struck me is when you talked about that Morris told you that you're not your mind. Now, I've been, in the coaching arena for a while and, yes, mindset and all these words, but sometimes it just needs somebody to just say something for it to like ping in your head. And it's working out now how to separate me from my mind. But I found that really helpful is you give some really useful sort of what you call them fundamentals that are really practical. They're doable. They're not impossible to do and it's not difficult to do. It's just doing them. That's where the difficulty comes in, is actually doing them as opposed to the difficulty of the project, if that made sense.
Yeah.
But one of the things that really struck me, and I don't know whether it's the timing of listening to your book or what it is, but you start your book with, and spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't read the book, but you start your book with that when you were 24, you wanted to end your life. I mean, that's pretty much how you enter into the book.
Yeah.
And it's something that, listening to your story and listening to your book and the lessons that you've learned over the years from your experiences as well as from your clients, is this getting to that point where that's it, you want to exit stage left, as you said earlier on the podcast. And we've come across two people that we know who have tried to exit stage left, and how that mind just gets in and just does that damage that makes you want to choose to end your life. Whereas, as you said, you're not your mind. And this is a concept that I've been mulling over in my head, because I've got, yes, I've read books on mindset and think positive and change your thoughts and neuroscience. And as you said, there's loads of books you can read. There's a lot of books you can listen to. There's podcasts, there's YouTube, there's all sorts. There's a lot. It's not through lack of information. It's
Exactly,
just too much information.
Yeah.
But sometimes we just need that one that just hits you at that time. And when you spoke about you're not your mind, and I think it was also the combination of your story, how you landed up in Morris's office, and through these men that we know personally, is realizing how powerful the mind is, and what a powerful tool essentially is that's not us. And this is something that I have been sort of mulling over as I've been listening to your book, and just trying to understand the concept in my mind, that I'm separate from it. And how is it that we get so into our minds that we actually forget that it's a totally separate entity? And quite often when you said, you're not your mind, it's that voice. And quite often I'm actually having that conversation with my voice, and I'm like, yeah, I know that's what you're saying, but but it's still that powerful tool, especially, and I think a lot of it is, especially if you don't know that how powerful the mind is, you don't know about shifting the mindset or shifting your thoughts, how it can just take you into that despair or depression, and I know that we're sort of going a little bit into the deep and the dark, but with what's going on in the world, and knowing that people are really struggling, I wanted to bring this up because we don't know who's listening, and this might just help them to not stage left, but maybe stage right and ask for help.
I hope so.
If that's the right analogy.
Well, we'll make it be, but no, if it does that, that'd be incredible, right? I mean, that's probably one of the reasons why I decided to share the story, that even if it affects one person and keeps them on the stage, that's great. There's a lot of what you just said there for me, and I suppose there's a couple of things I should say. First of all, this is what's striking me now, is that, like, there's a lot of information in the book, right? So you could say, well, hang on, Shane, that kind of contradicts what you're saying about information doesn't change anything. And I suppose the reason that what I've realized over time is a little bit to your point, Natalie, about repetition, is that you're kind of repeating in a way that doesn't hopefully seem like repetition, by telling different stories around the same point, using different metaphors around the same point, using different diagrams around the same point, all with the intention of facilitating your mind to kind of shut off a little bit, right? So the best way to read that book, to be honest with you, it was meant to be a playbook, first of all, is like, in terms of that you might come back to it and say, actually, you know what, this is coming up, I might just read that chapter about the projector because it'd get me in the right mood. That's the way I saw it, after you'd read it once. But just based on what you said, and I completely relate to the way you described, I'm thinking about the mind and I can have an argument with myself. I totally get that. But here's what I'm going to say to you. That sounds to me like the mind is trying to understand itself. And I think it's even easier than that. My instinct is like, forget about trying to get an answer. Switch off. You've already kind of put enough, but it sounds like you've already put enough kind of almost analysis or analytical effort into it. That's enough. Now switch off, relax your mind, relax the snow globe, and expect penny drops to come whenever they come, but they won't come when you're overthinking like that. That'd be my take on it. And so to me, like there are different, like there's loads of different. The mind is a funny thing. I think distinctions can really be helpful in terms of navigating. Metaphors can be useful because when you're into the unseen world like this, words or information can be limiting because you get into analysis. And once you go into analysis, from what I realized as the world's expert on overthinking, on overwhelm, and analytical thinking, this is me, right? I've had to reform myself. So now it's just like, no. The mode of and analyzing, trying to get the answer, what's this? No, that to me is a forced effort mode. It's useful in certain contexts up to a certain point, but I've realized that actually, do you know what? When I said to you about that presence that we talked earlier on, and under whatever way you can cultivate, just being kind of centered, calm, clear, centered, not overly analyzing. I'm just very present, and I'm still focused and engaged, but it's like a kind of a natural concentration. When you're in that mode, and I guess my best with both of you is because it's universal, is that, yeah, actually, I'd say if you reflect on it, you're going to go, have there been times when if you're in that mode, you get these kind of, oh, because when do you get your best ideas? Natalie, when do you get your best ideas?
The shower and driving.
Yeah. So what's that about?
Well, you relaxed. I mean, the shower is usually habit. You just doing it. You don't have to think about what you're doing, and you just allowing your mind to mull over anything, because what can you do? You're showering. You can't be on your phone. You can't be on the computer. You can't be reading. You can't be doing anything.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you're anything like me, you can't even listen to anything because it's too noisy.
When you're in the shower, what's happening is, once you understand the dynamic is, essentially what's happening is you're distracting your mind, your attention out of thought, and it's more into kind of a neutral position. Why? Because, well, the warm water or cold water is bringing your attention more into the senses. And, you kind of go into kind of like almost like free flow mode. That's the mode that I love. That's the mode that's the mode that's not really in business, for example. But actually, that's the mode that I'm trying to bring more and more into business because I'm realizing, hey, listen, Natalie, I asked the group of business people today, I said, hey, where do you get your best ideas? A lot of them said the shower. Some of them said driving. Some of them said, oh, I want to go for a run. Now, what do they all have in common? Because okay, on one level, if you're doing them, like if you're driving, for example, you might be listening to music and you're just kind of in a relaxed mode. That's the way to read the book, actually, is that kind of mode. Not looking for where's the answer, what am I missing, where's the nugget, what's the 3 steps, what's the magic formula. You go in hunting like that, I don't think you're going to get it. I think it's more like listen to it, read it like music, and just say, just let it wash over you, and then trust that, you know what, my own intuition, which is innate, which is connected to my own life intelligence. Like we all have a life intelligence. When I look at squirrels, collecting their nuts, I know they didn't go to a collecting nut workshop and to get trained on it or have any coaches helping them. It seemed to be innate, which is incredible. Or, when the birds start to fly south for the winter, nobody taught them to do that. That's innate. That's in a life intelligence. So like life is incredible. There's that intelligence in my body. If my hand gets cut, I don't have to tell it. I don't have to think about it. It just heals itself. Now, what if the same thing is in our minds? I think it is. I think actually, whatever intelligence created us, I think it did a damn good job. The only thing we didn't get was an instruction manual. So, but if that intelligence is in nature and if it's in my body, why wouldn't it be inside in me? And I think it is. That's my experience now. I think and I think it's worth experimenting with and say, well, hang on, what does that mean? Like, so what if, you know, those kind of aha moments we talked about there, Natalie, in the shower or the driving, what if you could get more of those more often? Because usually, because when I said to the guys this morning, I said, hey, you know, and somebody said, actually, I get my best business ideas on holidays. You know, they're similar, relaxing the mind. And they're like, yeah, but it's a work idea. I said, yeah, but so what if we could get those high quality ideas? Because that's what they said, they were high quality or solutions, or actually, I need to go that way. That's what I need to do. Why didn't I see it? It was right in front of my face. The reason I didn't see it because we all have this busy mind. And the busy mind overactivity, which is like, where's the answer? Where's the answer? It's causing stress. It's affecting sleep. It's knocking us out of the moment, which means that we can't even enjoy life the way we should, the way that I think we like in this day and age, we should for most people, it's possible, way more than they are. And then also that connection with relationships. If you're in your head all the time, asking questions, analyzing, you're bringing a habit into your relationship that isn't really going to be helpful. The single best thing I know with my kids and with my wife Judy is, can I be present? And when I'm present, it's weird but beautiful insofar as that I seem to be able to, from my own intuition, if I trust it, be able to kind of understand what to do that's relevant and best in the moment. I think every mother knows that instinctively. Um, I think fathers are wired slightly differently, but with a little bit of hand-holding, they can get there. Some have it quicker than others, but it's in there. And that same thing, though, I've seen it with the best entrepreneurs that I've ever worked with. Um, Nobody ever told them it. They can't even tell anybody else how to do it. But because I've spent 25 years trying to understand why is this happening, and then doing exactly what everybody else did, which is, you know, read the books. Here's the 10 steps to greatness. Not quite working for me there. Um, and I've realized, oh, do you know what? This is so much simpler than I think we've been told over the years. And that's okay because our job is to try and evolve and help each other. And I've come to the very clear conclusion that actually most of everything that I'm looking for is innate. My job is to, as best I can, keep myself in what I call a 3C state: calm, clear, centered. And yeah, it does require like everything, attention and effort, I guess, to a degree, or application, maybe is a better word. But my own experiment with it is that it's just incredibly, it gives a lot of freedom and radically reduces stress, brings a lot more contentment in. And I think just the misunderstanding around, like, there's loads of different things you can do and spend time on. I've done it in terms of like trying to change my self-image, trying to get around limiting beliefs, looking at my values and purpose. I'm not saying any of that isn't useful, but I actually think it's easier than that. Because I think when you're connected to yourself, calm in the way we're talking about, that your mood is in a good place, what seems to happen is that purpose finds you. I don't have to come up with a statement that says, this is my purpose. I might not be able to tell you what it is, but I know I have purpose. And that kind of comes from within. So I'm very curious. Like now, most of my work is very focused on, like I have to go through logical stuff of, you know, how do you manage your time? How do you manage your mind? Business stuff, outer game stuff, so that, because I work with very practical people, so that at least I can get some buy-in. And then once I do, I connect it to the inner game. And then I just keep going. If they allow me, I'll keep going a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper, so that they start to experience, oh, hang on a second here. I see what you're saying. Because actually that's what I used to do when I was younger. And I forgot. Because I thought that was the wrong way. You know, and it's funny, Lenka, when you were saying, you know, where do you start? Where do you start? I mean, I think what coming to mind for me is, I'd say to my clients a great question, which is very practical, which is like, look, you're going to have some days where it's just like, oh my God, you know, I feel like I'm going backwards here, you know. And then that's your mind, really. Your mind will come in then and go, it's not working. It's never going to work, you know, da 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 da. Especially when your mood is low and you're tired. And that's when you have to kind of remember, I'm not my mind, I'm not my inner voice. I'm going to look after myself. I'm going to care for myself like somebody that I love. What do you need? Caring for yourself is really important. And then that question, like, okay, will I start again tomorrow? Really powerful question. Will I start again tomorrow? Because everybody, no matter who you are, I don't care who you are, you have down days, you have bad days, you have tough days. Don't believe anybody who tells you that they don't, because that's just not true. I used to believe that. I've worked with enough really successful people, well-known people to understand, oh, that's BS. Everybody has those bad days, and I wish they'd talk about it more. Because I think people would go, oh, because we can kind of beat ourselves up a little bit, thinking, oh, look at them, they're up here. A lot of the time that isn't true, you know. And the other thing that came to mind from that question is, you know, I like my mind tries to complicate things. Shane, in terms of, let's say, that awareness in your CEO bit, I think their job is to try and keep things as simple as possible. And if it gets too complicated, I see that as a warning sign for me. I'm not saying that's true for everybody, but I just realized, because my analytical mind, like, I did engineering as a degree. It loves spreadsheets. It loves analysis. It loves, you know, getting into it. It was chemical engineering, but that has a value in a certain context, but not as the leader of my life. You don't want somebody who's highly analytical running your life. They need to have empathy. They need to have emotional intelligence. They need to be connected to presence. And so I just have a very simple system for myself every day, which is, you know, I just ask myself, you know, where am I in relation to the feeling? I just call it the feeling, and the feeling is me being centered. And I have a very clear measure as to, okay, when Shane is centered, he's here. And some days I go, oh, I'm 3 points off that center, and I don't beat myself up. I just go, okay, I'm aware I'm off. I just watch myself, watch my thinking, and I might think about, well, what can I do to help get myself back to center? And that might be a walk, it could be meditation, or it could be reading a book, or it could be doing nothing. It could be going for a swim, it could be going for a shower. So, Natalie, you might laugh at this. I'll often, if I want to break my mind pattern, have a shower. But I put it on cold to really shock myself out of, because like there's absolutely no way you're going to be thinking the same thing. If you put it on the coldest setting of the shower, I just jump in. And that's one of the reasons why I know people like cold water swimming. They like how it feels after, because apart from the physical impact of the endorphins and everything else, which is scientifically proven, it's a fact, really what they're getting is a break from their mind. Because, you know, I only thought of something recently. I haven't said this before, but like, I've got 2 kids, and you're always very sensitive with kids in particular, and like, it's funny listening to them. The school they're in is great, but they talk about, they're very sensitive to things like bullying, which is brilliant. But who's the biggest bully of all? Us, yeah, to ourselves. So that bully needs to be taken down. And the best way to take it down is not to argue with it or to give out to it. It's really just to kind of go, ignore it. Ignore it. And as that great book, which I read many years ago, it's a famous title, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. There's a lot of truth and wisdom in that statement. Okay, it's okay to feel fear. Don't beat yourself up for feeling fear. Fear is your companion when you're an entrepreneur. Part of the game. Fear is your companion as a human being. And like, life is a contact sport. You're going to get hurt. You're going to get punched. You are. There's no point denying it. And it's just like, yeah, okay, Grant, but will I start again?
So much in there, and it's when you were talking about cold showers, you were talking to Lenka. I avoid cold showers. I don't like them, but I get it. I get how it can shift your mindset, because it usually would be me, just saying blue language that is not very ladylike. But yeah, and often I've thought, I'd just love to just stand in the shower and just stop the mind, just shut up, shush, keep quiet. And one of the things that you said is, we do overcomplicate things. I think we just like things we make things complicated, whereas it can be really simple. And one of the analogies that came to mind when you were, talking about being present, I mean, that is such a powerful thing, is being in the moment. And yes, it's said a lot, but it is actually when you just there, that is when you are slowing down the mind. And when I often see mothers or parents, not just mothers, but parents picking up their kids from school, or people taking their dogs for a walk, they're not with their kids or their dog because they're on the phone, and quite often I've seen a kid just run across the road because the parent is on the phone. It's like, watch your kid,
Yeah.
walk with your kid, go home, find out how the kid's day was. And the same with when you take your dog for a walk, be with the dog, just see what the dog is doing, just watch the dogs. What are they sniffing? What can you smell? What are you noticing around you? I mean, that's the way dogs like to. It's what we call P-mails. They're checking up what's going on in the neighborhood. Who's new? Who's got any news? Who's who in the zoo type of thing. But the thing is, that's such a powerful moment if you're a dog owner, when you go out with your dog, to just be present in that moment. So these are the two things that sort of came to my mind as you were explaining things. And just being, it is busy at the moment, and you like you said, though, that the mobile phone is right there. We can just pick it up first thing in the morning, go to bed looking at it, turn it off, try to go to sleep, pick it up first thing. It is an easy thing to do, but yet it's a simple thing to just turn it off, just put it aside, because it's not glued to us. We can leave it. We can leave it in another room. It's okay if it's in another room. It's going to be all right. Nothing's going to happen to it.
No, it's very true. And I mean, like, obviously people are, they might know that they're addicted to it. But knowing you're addicted to it doesn't necessarily mean that you won't put the phone down or turn it off. But really, really what's happening there, I think, is that people are addicted to thinking. So, that's the biggest, for me, that's the biggest addiction in the planet, is we're addicted to thinking, we're addicted to busy minds. We feel that that's the way it has to be. For me, the busy mind is the biggest enemy of better business. It's the biggest enemy of a better life. But people don't realize that they're addicted to thinking, that, I need to be active in it. It's like a drug. And so that's why they're always looking to do something, whether it's the phone or whether it's watching entertainment or whether it's talking to somebody, or, I mean, your mind will go, I'm bored, if it's just sitting looking at a tree. Yet that might be what is needed. And also, look, I should say as well that, look, just in case, if they haven't stayed on the podcast so far and they've switched off because it wasn't for them, this bit is going to be very practical. That, like, if we bring this into a business context or a job context, right? To me, it's very practical, but you see, ultimately, it has to be about results. Because a lot of this stuff, you can kind of get into the software elements, think, oh yeah, no, but no results. So you got to measure it up with results. So to me, results are everything. So if the results aren't happening, well, then it's on me. I need to change something. No matter how much I'm in love with my own thoughts or my own view or perspective, if the results aren't happening, it's on me. But a key thing to help your mind, because we started I was talking about relaxed concentration. So I'd often think about a golfer. The top skill for a golfer is the ability to hold concentration at a certain level under pressure. But that's the same for any elite athlete. And that skill is relevant to enjoying your life. It's also that's the key skill to learning. And it's the key skill to getting stuff done. So I'll always ask people, I say, hey, listen, I know I'm talking about nice stuff about presence and feeling good and state, but let's get into results. So for you in your job, what are the top 3 things that you have to get done that'll make the biggest difference in the next month? And let's get on that. And we work out what they are. And then we go, right, let's activate the missile. I want you to see yourself achieving those goals. as outcomes. I want you to go into the future. I want you to see it. I want you to feel what it's like to kind of get those. So now we're priming those into the unconscious mind. Now that's me as the leader of my mind saying, right, guys, everybody wake up. This is what we're focusing on. Everybody in that team, in my unconscious mind, in my imagination, in the projector team, in the missile team, everybody activate. This is where we're going. And that to me is leading your mind. So that's becoming the boss of your mind. And so it's because I'll say, well, look, yeah. And as we're going along, if you've cultivated the skill of being present, which is the snow globe one, that, okay, my mind just got busy. I want to settle it now. I'm taking a mental pit stop. We'll take a break. And to do that during the day. So you're training your mind. It's active. Now it's calm. And over time, you're gradually kind of making it calmer. So it's a skill. And you've identified it as a skill. That's practiced. Like if I want to get good at the guitar, I can't just pick it up. I have to practice. So what are the things that you should practice every day that actually, if you stay with them over time, will transform everything? That is a great question. And then just do it. And the answer to that question is not going to be that complicated. The only question is going to be, will you do it? And are you ready to do it? Because some people will say they're ready. And I'll say, well, look, are you ready or are you kind of ready? And a lot of the time they go, yeah, I'm kind of ready. Because if you're ready, then you'd say, right, I know what I need to do. Now let's just do those things every day. Let's take a bit of time out to snow down the slow globe. Oh, it's too busy. I'll do it next week. Not ready. Not ready. When you're ready, you just say, look, tell me what to do, and I'll do it. I didn't realize at the time, but when I was with Morris, I was ready because I was ready to take my life. And when he said, okay, the pain can go away, I went, the pain can go away? Oh my God. Tell me what to do. Whatever you tell me to do, I will do it. If you say, stand on my head for 10 minutes or 10 hours every day, I'll do it. Now, thankfully, he didn't say that. So I didn't have to get tested on it. But if he had, I would have gone, okay, grand, because I was in so much pain. So pain can be a real value add. I mean, go back to what you said, Natalie, about people in a really dark place. Look, on a very practical level, again, I'd say, listen, there's so much support available today in today's world that wasn't available when I was there. I was lucky because my dad knew somebody. It never occurred to me that I could call somebody like that. It wasn't as readily available. Like, you're not the only one. These things happen. It can happen to the best. Don't suffer in silence. Pick up the phone. Talk to somebody. You're not, like, whatever your mind is telling you about your life is not true. You can turn it around. So that to me is like, I'd say that to anybody. And if my life is anything, that's what it genuinely has been, is that, like, it was so bad. I remember being with Morris thinking, I remember looking him in the eyes thinking, can you make the pain go away? And he was like, look, Shane, it's going to go away. It's just going to take a little bit of time. But he was so straight. I went, okay, I trust this guy. Because I was thinking, is he full of it? I went, okay, I trust him. And what's weird is that, and I think it seems to be universal, that I've seen research on this, that people who've had significant trauma in their lives, something like that for me was a trauma, that if they're asked, would you go back and change anything? I think universally they all say no, because it has helped me become who I am. I wouldn't have the life that I have if that hadn't happened. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. I'd be in corporate life. So to loop back on the practical to close it out, like for me, I'm always asking myself and my clients every week, okay, look, what are the 3 to 5 things max, very practical stuff that will make a difference? Then the game is to not get distracted by your mind into other stuff over the week so that you deliver those outcomes. And that is not easy anymore, because it's almost like you're coming out of a gate at one end of a pitch, and the successful week is at the end of the pitch, and you start to walk along, and all of a sudden all these people start running at you, waving things, trying to distract you off in different directions. I think that's a metaphor for the busy world we're in, and you're trying to navigate your way to the end of the pitch. You won't get everything done. What matters is, do you get the stuff done that matters to you, that's going to move the dial in your work and your life? And have you got the ability to enjoy it along the way? And that is all possible.
It's so much information, and we have been talking for ages, and really appreciate, you sharing your time with us. And I in some ways I feel bad about this, but in other ways I'm like, no, I don't really. Normally at this time, we always ask our guest and we always want more. Both of us are a bit greedy that way. We do want more. But we always ask our guest, is there a last tip, a gold nugget, or is there something that we haven't asked that you would like to share? Now's that space just for that last little bit of wisdom that we can get out of you.
Well, I think you gave me the answer in your question. The mind is always looking for more. So I've had so many situations with my clients where they have achieved incredible things. I remember one woman telling me she wanted to, I was working with her a few years ago to grow her business to X million. And that was the dream. It seemed impossible. And we worked together for about 4 years and we achieved the dream. And I'll never forget, because this happened with different clients in different ways. She was the first one. I remember thinking, I'm never going to do this again in terms of this way. I have to flag it up front. And it was the basis for what I call the more monster. Your mind is a more monster. It always wants more. And I always remember after she hit the target, I said, how do you feel? She said, I feel nothing. I said, oh, well, I said, to be honest with you, I feel like a bit of a loser. I said, what? I said, but you said this is what you wanted to do. She said, I know, but I've been thinking about it. X really is nothing. 2X, now that's something. And this, she was doubling in millions what she should be at, because her mind, at the time, I wasn't articulating to you as clearly as I am now about I'm not my mind. I didn't say it it's such a short phrase, isn't it, Natalie? Like, it's such a short phrase, but actually I didn't say it like that because I probably didn't see it as clearly. I'm very adamant now. I know I'm not my mind, but the mind is a more monster. And so it always wants more. And so, like, to your point, yeah, and there's nothing wrong, by the way, with, I'm not saying that in any way it's wrong with asking me a question, because it's a good question, but at the same time, in the context of what we're talking about, just observe and be aware of this trait in your mind, in everybody's mind, which is, when you get to something, we'll all do it. And then the mind will go, yeah, that's grand. Maybe enjoy it for a couple of days. Then it's like, right, yeah, but really, it'd be great to be over there. And the classic one is if you're ever buy a new car or whatever, and it's like, oh yeah, you've spent so much time, it's going to be amazing. I'm going to be that. And then you get into the car and it lasts for a little bit of time, but after a while, it's just like, it's just gone. The mind wants something else. It's more money, it's more information. But here's a clanger to confuse the mind. And maybe it's a very relevant tip is, what if we genuinely made the assumption and worked from the assumption for a month that actually you don't need any more information. You have enough innately in yourself. Now, whatever you've learned is enough, but innately, with your own intuition and wisdom, if you allow yourself to kind of just get stuck in and learn from experience, learn on the go, your intelligence, your experience is way more valuable than my information. You have enough to make the changes that you want to make. So, I am very clear when I'm working with my clients, I don't really cause the change for them. I'm a catalyst of anything. My job is to kind of help them get out of their own way so that they cause the change. So early in my career, my ego might have gone, oh, we launched a great change on this, that, and the other. And I still have to watch that in my ego, because ego is part of my inner world, it's part of my inner team. It's got a use, but it's also dangerous. But I'm very clear now that no, my job is to be the catalyst and just help them flower, help them to get out of their own way, understand the variables of the inner world, manage the more monster, and make progress and hopefully make an impact.
And that is actually really good a good nugget that we found. And for those who haven't read the book, there is actually a lovely little story in there about aeroplanes and the mole monster, and I'm going to leave it at that. So go read the book, because that's where it will be. So if one of our listeners or some of our listeners are thinking, you know what, I want to get into Shane's world, I want to find out a bit more about what it is that he's doing, how can people connect with you or find out information?
If you want to get into my world, you first of all, you probably lost your mind. You want to be very careful coming into my world. No, I'd say, first of all, you can check out the podcast, The Inner Edge, which is on all major platforms. It's out every Monday morning. It's only about 10, 12 minutes long. It's very much hitting on the themes we talk about here. As you said, they can check out the book, The Inner CEO, which is also available on Audible, and all different formats. And then I guess there's my website, shanecraddock.com, with one D, CRADOCK. Maybe you could share it in the show notes. And I send out a weekly email, kind of, which is designed to be less than 60 seconds, a bit of inspiration. Sometimes I hit on the mind, sometimes I hit on life. The purpose is that you read it and you get inspired, because look, we all need motivation. What I find fascinating with some of this stuff is that I think one of you mentioned repetition earlier on. It might have been you, Lenka, but I do find that with the way the world is and there's so much going on, that it's very useful to listen to stuff or to read stuff, but just to kind of read it more as a reminder and kind of, oh yeah, and just get the spirits back up. Not so much looking for what am I missing. And if you remove that question from your mindset, even for a month, said, you know what, like I said, no, I'm missing nothing. I've got enough. I guarantee if you just said, okay, let's just get stuck in. Let's get into life and let's get into work. Let's really apply ourselves, look after ourselves. But no, I have enough. Try it as an experiment for a month, and then I think you'll see magic. So they're the three things anyway: the podcast, the book, and the website.
And all the links will be in the show notes in the description. So yes, anybody can access them.
Great.
Thank you so much. I mean, we could most probably talk for hours, but thank you so much for sharing your time with us, and your energy, and just being present in our podcast and sharing how people can have more life in one's life. And for our listeners, what has inspired you today? What have you got about the mind? And are you one of those that keeps your hand up when Shane asks, do you know that you are not your mind? Is it making sense? Has this conversation made sense to you? What aha moments have you had? What lessons have you learned? Or is this, again, you just getting more information and wanting more information? Anything is great, because it is wonderful to just have information, but have there been some tools there that you're thinking, you know what, I'm now ready to put these 3 things in place, find ways to quiet your mind, whatever it is, please share with us. Let us know what your thoughts are, what aha moments you've had, or have you just thought, another podcast about mind? It doesn't matter. Just share with us. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
But it doesn't matter about that, Natalie, because that's their inner voice. We won't listen to that if they say something negative. We disregard it.
There we go. Shane has spoken. And on that note, until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
If you enjoyed listening to our conversation, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and don't forget to subscribe. We would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and write a short review.